All right. So for the past month, we've been studying different judges, also known as prophets, who led Israel. So we talked about Deborah and Gideon. Before that, we talked about Joshua. Before that, we talked about Moses. So Deborah and Gideon, though, are judges from the book of Judges. And we spoke about how they both spoke with God and they guided Israel as God wished them, even though in Gideon's case, it wasn't exactly eager leadership, more like anxious leadership. So, as we previously discussed, this was a tradition started by Moses and Joshua, and Deborah and Gideon continued it. Israel did not have a proper king or leader, but rather a prophet who spoke to God and told the people what it is God desired of them. This essentially makes the prophet the leader of Israel, but it's not the same context as, say, a king. The tribes of Israel pretty much could rule themselves as they liked, as long as they obeyed God's law, and the judge only really stepped in when either the people had a dispute they couldn't solve themselves, or when another nation was messing around with Israel. This is different from a king, because a king has absolute power, and is rarely hands off, whereas the prophets were a lot more like hands off, only come to us if you need us. So it's the king's job to know every bit of a country's business. A king would also unite the tribes under a single rulership instead of individual nations loosely held together by a judge. So the judge is more like if you had a president over the 13 colonies, very early days when all the states kind of felt like different places, as opposed to a king, which is more like a president now, though even the president is not a king, right? There are very few modern monarchs, and the ones who exist are nothing like ancient monarchs in the amount of power they actually have. However, for now we have judges, and the judge we are studying today is Samson. So please open your Bibles to Judges 13, and we are going to start with 13, 1 through 5. That's 13, 1 through 5. The Israelites again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines 40 years. There was a certain man of Zorah, of the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah. His wife was barren, having borne no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, "Although you are barren, having borne no children, you shall conceive and bear a son. Now be careful not to drink wine or strong drink, or eat anything unclean, for you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor is to come to his head, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from birth. It is he who shall begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines." All right, so once again, the Bible is saying the Israelites strayed and God allowed another nation to take over them, this time for 40 years. We talked about before that this can be straight up, that they strayed, they did something wrong, or it can just be that that's how they interpret the fact that another group is oppressing them. These other people are called Philistines, and for 40 years, they're in charge of the Israelites, they're oppressing them, and God has not raised up a judge to save them until now. So a man named Manoah and his wife have no children. Then an angel appears and says they will have a child, a son, and God will raise up this son to deliver Israel from the Philistines. But he is also to be a Nazarite. Nazarite? What does that mean? Well, the angel says it means he can't have alcohol, eat anything unclean, or cut his hair. But how would his parents know what a Nazarite was? Was that a thing? And the answer is yes. Yes, it was. So we're going to turn back to number 6. And this entire chapter describes what it means to be a Nazarite. There's specific laws and rules that a person must follow in order to be a Nazarite, but we're only going to look at a little of it. All right. So number 6, 1 through 9. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when either men or woman make a special vow, the vow of the Nazarite, to separate themselves to the Lord, they shall separate themselves from wine and strong drink. They shall drink no wine vinegar or other vinegar, and shall not drink any grapefruit or eat grapes, fresh or dried. All their days as Nazarites they shall eat nothing that is produced by the grapevine, not even the seeds or the skins. All the days of their Nazarite vow, no razor shall come upon the head, until the time is completed, which they will separate themselves to the Lord. They shall be holy. They shall let the locks of the head grow long. All the days that they are separate themselves to the Lord, they shall not go near a corpse. Even if their father or mother, brother or sister should die, they may not defile themselves, because their consecration to God is upon the head. All their days as Nazarites, they are holy to the Lord. If someone dies very suddenly nearby, defiling the consecrated head, then they shall shave the head on the day of their cleansing. On the 7th day, they shall shave it." So a Nazirite basically means someone who has consecrated themselves to God. So it's sort of like becoming a priest. But remember, priests could only be men of the tribe of Levi. But becoming a Nazirite is open to a person of any tribe. And we saw that this person we're talking about is of the tribe of Dan. He's a Danite. This Nazirite option allows you to become a sort of priest and consecrate your life and time to God. The other interesting thing about a Nazirite is the Bible specifically says it can be either a man or a woman, that both can take this vow and become sort of a lay priest. To show that they are set apart from other people, like priests and not common people, they have to obey these certain laws. They couldn't drink alcohol. They couldn't even eat grapes, which is where the majority of their alcohol would have come from, and wine. They couldn't cut their hair. They could not go near a dead body. And they, should they accidentally do so, they had a very specific cleansing ritual, different from the standard cleansing ritual that involved shaving their heads to show that they're temporarily out of service. So that's just part of the rules. There's even way more rules than that. Moving on, though, to Judges 13:24. The woman bore a son, named him Samson. The boy grew, and the Lord blessed him. So this couple have a baby. They name him Samson, and he grows, and God blesses him. So it is Samson who is supposed to be the Nazirite. It is Samson that the angel said that they were going to have, the son they were going to have, that then was going to be consecrated to the Lord. All right, Judges 14:1-4. Once Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw a Philistine woman. Then he came up and told his father and mother, I saw a Philistine woman at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. But his father and mother said to him, Is there not a woman among your kin, or among all our people, that you must go to take a wife from an uncircumcised Philistine? But Samson said to his father, Get her for me, because she pleases me. His father and mother did not know that this was from the Lord, for he was seeking a pretext to act against the Philistines. At the time, the Philistines had dominion over Israel. So Samson grows up. He's a man. And one day he sees a woman, and she's a Philistine woman, so she's not an Israelite. And he wants to marry her. And his parents are like, Is that a good idea? The Philistines are our oppressors. Can't you find a nice local girl to settle down with? But Samson is like, Nope, I want to marry her. Now, this seems stupid. But the Bible specifically says that this is because God wants Samson to marry the Philistine girl. So this is one instance where Samson is not just following, like, whatever he wants to do. It does seem like it is God that asked him to marry this girl. And it says it's because then Samson will have an excuse to get angry at the Philistines and go to war with them. It's been shown in the past stories that God doesn't really need an excuse. If God wants to end oppression, he usually just tells the judge, hey, it's time to overthrow these guys and be free. So why is it different now? Perhaps it's Samson who needs an excuse. Maybe he's become complacent in his life. You know, Gideon didn't want to overthrow the Midianites who oppressed them. Maybe Samson's kind of the same way. Maybe the Israelites are complacent under Philistine rule and wouldn't follow Samson's call to battle if it came. We don't know. All we know is that Samson marries a Philistine woman, and it allows him to get to know and get annoyed by some Philistines. All right, so Judges 14:5-9. Then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah. When he came to the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion roared at him. The Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and he tore the lion apart barehanded, as one might tear apart a kid. Once again, that means a goat, not a child. But he did not tell his father or mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman. She pleased Samson. After a while, he returned to marry her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion, and honey. He scraped it out into his hands and went on eating as he went. When he came to his father and mother, he gave some to them, and they ate it. But he did not tell them he had taken the honey from the carcass of the lion. So Samson and his parents are traveling down to see this woman he wants to marry. On the journey, he gets separated from his parents, and he comes across a lion, like you do. And Samson is so strong that he's able to tear the lion apart with his bare hands. This is very disconcerting. This makes Samson ridiculously strong, right? I also don't know anyone who can tear apart a goat with their bare hands, but presumably that was an analogy that made sense back then. And once again, when the Bible says a kid, it means a goat, not a child. They use child to mean child. Kid is modern slang, right? So this also means that Samson just touched a dead body. And when we read that section in Numbers, it was pretty clear that Nazarites aren't supposed to do that. Of course, this is a lion body, but it's still dead. He's still not supposed to defile himself by like touching dead things, right? But if you do touch a dead body, because it happens, right? You have to defend yourself from lions, or you're like hanging out with someone and they drop dead next to you. You know, you can't avoid death all the time. Then there's a purification ritual. So you would think when Samson meets back up with his parents, he would tell them. But does he? No. So Samson goes down and talks to the Philistine woman and is like, yep, I definitely want to marry her. And then he's traveling again between the town he is from and where his future wife lives. And he sees the dead body of the lion, and some bees have basically made their hive in it. Seems all very strange to me. But I guess bees are going to hive where bees are going to hive, right? Then Samson, the Nazarite, who's not supposed to touch a dead body, gathers honey from inside it and eats it. Then he takes it home to his parents and tells them to eat it, and he doesn't tell them where he got it from, aka a dead body. So now they're all unclean, and Samson has told no one. Why? Why does Samson do this? I don't know. I don't think any of us really know, right? I personally don't think Samson is nefarious. I don't think Samson never comes across to me as someone who is trying to flout God's laws or get himself or his parents in trouble. Having read the whole story, I honestly think it's just that Samson doesn't always think his actions all the way through, which is a crime we often commit, especially us young people, right? When you're, in middle school or in high school, sometimes you're just thinking like, oh man, this honey tastes good. I'm going to eat it, right? And you're not thinking through that, well, if I eat the honey, then now I'm unclean, right? So it's not nefarious, but it still doesn't mean it's not wrong, right? He sees this honey, he sees a woman, he likes her, he wants to marry her. He sees a lion, so he kills it. He sees honey, so he eats it. He's not exactly the sort of guy who sits around contemplating philosophy and academia. He's a man of action, and sometimes it makes him reckless. Sometimes it means he doesn't think about the consequences of his actions. So it's not wrong to not be contemplative or philosophical, but it is wrong to, when you do something stupid, not, apologize for it, not to atone for it. And, you don't have to be deeply academic or philosophical to think through the next 2 steps of your actions, right? To be like, I know some rules that I'm supposed to obey, and do these follow these rules, right? No one's asking Samson to be, PhD in biblical knowledge. He just needed to know 5 rules, and these would have been rules he would have been taught his whole life. It's not like his parents wouldn't have reiterated them to him over and over again, but he just doesn't think. He's capable of thinking, and he doesn't do it. And that is true of so many of us. So this is the number one lesson we're going to take away from Samson, because this is not the last time, you guys. So Samson marries this Philistine woman whose name we never really know because the Bible. So Judges 14, we're going to read all 12 through 20 in one long section, but I couldn't fit it all in one slide. So just be patient. So Judges 14, 12 through 20. Samson said to them, "Let me now put a riddle to you. If you can explain it to me within 7 days of the feast, I find out, in 7 days of the feast and find it out, then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 festal garments. But if you cannot explain it to me, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 festal garments." So they said to him, "Ask your riddle. Let us hear it." He said to them, "Out of the eater came something sweet. Out of the strong came something sweet." But for 3 days they could not explain the riddle. On the 4th day they said to Samson's wife, "Coax your husband to explain the riddle to us, or we will burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us here to impoverish us?" So Samson's wife wept before him, saying, "You hate me. You do not really love me. You have asked a riddle of my people, but you have not explained it to me. He said to her, "Look, I have not told my father or my mother. Why should I tell you?" She wept before him the 7 days that their feast lasted, and because she nagged him, on the seventh day he told her. Then she explained the riddle to her people. The men of the town said to him on the seventh day before the sun went down, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" He said to them, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle." Oh, I didn't. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed on to him, and he went down to Ashkelon. He killed 30 men of the town who took their spoil and gave the festal garments to those who had explained the riddle. In hot anger, he went back to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best man. Let me drink some water. So Samson goes back to his wife's family, and thinking he's clever, he thinks of an unfair riddle. Out of the eater comes something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. He wants his wife's family to solve it, and if they do, he'll give them a present. The answer is, of course, the honey he got from the lion, but it's not exactly a riddle you can solve with logic. It's exactly the sort of unfair riddle that's not a riddle at all. It's more of an inside joke or a bizarre knowledge test. It's like when Bilbo in The Hobbit asked Gollum, "What's in my pocket?" That's not a riddle. Like, cheater, right? Like, how can... There's no way to deduce, right? That's not a riddle. A riddle is something that you can take and figure out. That's like, oh, you have to cross the stream, and there's a man, a woman, and a chicken, and a goat, and a dog. And the dog and the chicken can't be in the boat together, and the goat and the woman can't be in the boat together, and you can only put 2 people in the boat, so how are you going to cross the river? That's a riddle. Something that you can, like, logic out, right? And sometimes there's a word trick to the riddle, right? Like, the riddle that's like, a man and his son. Oh, no. Let's not even do that riddle. Okay, so there's lots of riddles that are like word tricks, right? So needless to say, the people are frustrated because it's a stupid riddle. And the Philistines asked Samson's wife, who's a Philistine, to get the answer from Samson. So he goes before them and cries. She goes before him and cries. And it's all over dramatic. Like, "You hate me. Tell me your answer." And Samson's like, "I haven't even told my parents. Why would I tell you? One, because she's your wife? Whatever." This is terrible marriage advice from Samson. You should tell your spouse things. But she keeps crying and pushing him for the answer. So finally he tells her. And then, of course, she tells everyone else. And then they give another answer to Samson, who knows they got it from... Samson knows they got the answer from his wife. Here's another marriage advice that we should not take from Samson. Never call your wife a cow. Anyway, Samson is angry about them using his wife like this. So instead of giving him the presents he promised, he kills 30 guys. And then he goes home without his wife. Definitely not a happy marriage. And this is something we're going to see time and time again with Samson, is he blames the woman ultimately for something he did, right? He told a bad riddle. She begged him for an answer. He didn't have to give it to her. Who cares how much he begs? If his plan was to, impoverish them, he didn't have to tell her the answer. But he does. And so she tells them, which is inevitable because she's a Philistine and they threatened her family. They said they were going to burn her family down. And so who does he blame? He doesn't blame himself for giving away the answer. No, he blames his wife, who probably didn't want to be in this marriage in the first place. So you can imagine what Samson's wife's parents think. Samson just killed a whole bunch of their people after calling his wife a cow. And just all around, he was not very nice to them with this unfair riddle. So they're like, well, we better find another husband for our daughter. After a while, Samson comes back and finds out his wife was given away. And he's like, what? And his wife's father is like, dude, we thought you hated her. We had to do something to take care of her. You can't just, back then, being married was like the number one protective status a woman had. It's not like today at all. Samson is so mad about this that he burns down their fields. The fields of the Philistines, who are the rulers of Israel at the moment. When the Israelites hear about this, they're furious. 3,000 Israelites from the tribe of Judah come to Samson and are like, dude, why would you burn down the field of the people who rule over us? Use your brain, Samson. Use your brain. This sort of supports the theory that the Israelites wouldn't have followed Samson into battle against the Philistines if he tried. And perhaps that's why God is going about this on a more individual level, as opposed to like Gideon gathering a whole army. Unclear. Anyway, Samson is like, they started it. And the Israelites are like, whatever, dude. We have to turn you into the Philistines because they're our rulers and you attack them. But at least they promise not to kill Samson. And instead, they bind him up and turn him in. They're going to leave him to the Philistines to exact judgment on Samson. All right. Judges 15:14 through 15. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting to meet him, and the Spirit of the Lord rushed on him, and the ropes that were on his arms became like flax that was caught on fire, and his bonds melted off his hands. Then he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, reached down and took it, and with it killed 1,000 men. The Philistines come to get Samson to exact their revenge. But Samson is so strong. He breaks free of the ropes he's been bound with and then finds the jawbone of a donkey and kills 1,000 men with a donkey jawbone. Jawbones are pretty strong. You know, actually your jaw muscle is like one of the strongest muscles in your body. The bone itself is probably about as strong as any other bone in your body. So it's strong, but it's not that strong. This speaks more to Samson's fighting ability and his massive strength than the strength of a jawbone. So don't take away from this that donkey jawbones are like adamantium claws. They're not. It's more like Samson is, you know, if we're going with the X-Men analogy, it's more like he's the one who can turn himself into all iron. Colossus, right? Yeah. In verse 20 of this chapter, it says, Samson judged Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines, which indicates that it's after this that Samson becomes a judge, but also that during his 20 years, they don't overthrow the Philistines. They still live under the Philistines' rule. But this is not the end of the story. We've had all of this chaos. This is not the end. Samson killing 1,000 men with a jawbone. Obviously, it does not free them from the Philistines. It's just an event in Samson's life. In fact, the most famous part of Samson's story is a part that we're just now getting to, which is the story of Samson and Delilah. So, Judges 16:4 through 8. Judges 16:4 through 8. After this, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The lords of the Philistines came to her and said to her, coax him and find out what makes his strength so great, and how we may overpower him, so that we may bind him in order to subdue him, and we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver. So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me what makes your strength so great, and how you could be bound so that one could subdue you. Samson said to her, if they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that are not dried out, then I shall become weak, and I will be like anyone else. Then the lords of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not dried out, and she bound him with them. While men were lying in wait in an inner chamber, she said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he snapped the bowstrings, as a strand of fiber snaps when it touches the fire. So the secret of his strength was not known. Samson falls in love with a woman named Delilah. We don't know anything about her. We don't know if she's a Philistine, if she's an Israelite, if she's a Midianite, if she's somebody else. But Samson falls in love with her, and there is nothing in the text that indicates Samson married her. In fact, earlier sections, if anything, seem to indicate that after his disastrous first marriage, Samson is less inclined to get married again, which once again goes directly against the rules God has laid out for his people. So Samson is basically living with this woman unmarried. So he's basically sleeping with her in an unmarried situation. And as we can tell, she's not even a great woman. This is Samson. So the Philistines asked Delilah to figure out Samson's weakness. Basically, it's like in the Disney movie Hercules, when Hades wants to use Megara to get to Hercules. That is Samson and Delilah. So Samson lies to her. He's suspicious, which that's one for Samson. Samson's thinking somewhere. And he tells her that if they bind him with a certain type of string, then he'll be like any other man. So she binds him up, presumably while he's sleeping, and then shouts, "Samson, the Philistines are here." Then Samson breaks the strings and is not captured by the Philistines. You would think at this point, Samson would use the brain God has given him and be like, I told Delilah how to hurt me, and then she immediately tried to hurt me. Maybe I should not trust with her and not hang out with her, and certainly not love her. But this is not what Samson does. And that's because, children, this has nothing to do with love. Samson is not in love with Delilah. I know that's the words that's translated here in English. I don't know what the Hebrew says. But he is in lust with her. He just wants to, have sex with her. That's it. And he doesn't care about her brains. He doesn't care that she literally wants to kill him, apparently. This is why God is pretty clear on lust is bad. It clouds your judgment, right? It also makes you misuse people, which we'll see in later stories as well. So, yes. None of this is good. So Samson doesn't learn from this. No. He doesn't say, maybe I should not hang out with this woman. Maybe I should break up with her. Maybe I should just not associate with her anymore. No. Judges 16:13-14. Then Delilah said to Samson, "Until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me how you could be bound." He said to her, "If you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web and make it tight with the pin, then I shall become weak and be like anyone else." So while he slept, Delilah took the 7 locks of his head and wove them into a web and made them tight with the pin. Then she said to him, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." And then he woke from his sleep, pulled away the pin, the loom, and the web. You guys. So instead of Samson getting mad at Delilah for trying to betray and kill him, Delilah gets mad at Samson and is like, "You lied to me. How dare you?" And instead of responding with, "Well, you tried to kill me, so we're kind of even," Samson just lies to her again and is like, braiding my hair. That'll do it. Braid my hair. I'll be weak. So once again, Samson is in lust with this woman, which is why he keeps staying with her, even though she obviously is literally trying to kill him. This is crazy. So he wants to be able to continue to sleep with her, so he just appeases her. This is ridiculous, you guys. This is ridiculous. So Samson lies to her again, and she tries it again, and again it doesn't work. Rinse and repeat. Judges 16:15-20. Then she said to him, "How can you say, 'I love you,' when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me 3 times now and have not told me what makes your strength so great." Finally, after she nagged him with her words day after day and pestered him, he was tired to death. So he told her his whole secret and said to her, "A razor has never come upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, then my strength would leave me. I would become weak and be like anyone else." When Delilah realized that he told her his whole secret, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, "This time come up, for he has told his whole secret to me." Then the lords of the Philistines came to her and brought the money in their hands. She let him fall asleep on her lap, and she called a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. He began to weaken, and his strength left him. Then she said, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." When he awoke from his sleep, he thought, "I will go out as the other times and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had left him. So the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes. They brought him down to Gaza and bound him with bronze shackles, and he ground out the mill in the prison. You guys. Delilah is again like, "Why do you keep lying to me?" She keeps pressing him about it, and he finally tells her the truth. Then he has never cut his hair from the day of his birth, as God asked of his mother. And should his hair be cut, his incredible strength would leave him. And Delilah basically goes immediately to the Philistines and is like, "Pay up!" So they pay her, and she cuts his hair. And when he awakes, he can't break free. His strength has left him. His hair is gone. The Philistines capture him, gouge out his eyes, and make him their prisoner. Samson is kept prisoner for a while because it brings the Philistines joy to have this mighty warrior humbled before him. They mock him for their enjoyment. Once again, this is a story when it's told where it's often told in a way where people talk about this horrible woman, how horrible Delilah was. No, Delilah was pretty bad. I'm not going to mince words. She just wanted to kill Samson. But she also never really, she kind of made that clear to Samson. So was Delilah bad? Yes. But Samson knowingly and willingly chose to hang out with this woman. He chose not to think with his brain and instead to think with his hormones. And be like, I don't care. You guys, this is why we talk about how these things are bad, right? Lust is bad. It led Samson to make bad decisions over and over again. He literally betrays himself and God for lust with a woman he knows is trying to kill him. So is Delilah bad? Yes. But Samson, in a lot of ways, is worse. Because Delilah, we don't expect anything from her. She's not a Nazarite. She's not basically a priest to God. As far as we know, she's not even an Israelite. She's doing what the people in power are asking her to do. So is she bad? Sure. But Samson knows better. Samson should be using his brain. Samson should be thinking things through, right? He knows he made a commitment to God. He knows what the 10 Commandments are. He knows what the law is. He knows he's breaking the law. He knows that Delilah has tried to kill him 3 times. And instead of walking away after any of those times, he continues to hang out with her, and he then, in the end, tells her his secret so she can take him down. A lot of times, this is us. We knowingly walk into these situations. We think, I can handle it. I know the situation is bad and full of sin, but I'm strong. Samson thought he was strong too. So Samson is kept prisoner for a while because it brings the Philistines joy to have this mighty warrior humbled before him. And they mock him for their enjoyment. Judges 16:28-30. Then Samson called to the Lord and said, Lord God, remember me and strengthen me only this once. O God, so that with this one act of revenge I may pay back the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars for which the house rested, and he leaned his weight against them, his right hand on the one, his left hand on the other. Then Samson said, Let me die with the Philistines. He strained with all his might, and the house fell on the lords and all the people who were in it. So those he killed at his death were more than those he killed during his life. So Samson prays to God, and he is like, please just give me strength one more time so I can end this. And God does. So Samson grabs the 2 pillars he's chained to, and he pulls them, and the building just collapses all around him, killing himself and all the people inside. And it says he killed more with his death than he ever killed with his life. This isn't usually how these stories go, is it? Usually our judge has a victory against his oppressor. Usually they free Israel. But Samson is defeated. Samson is repeatedly hot-headed and in the end defeated by his own lust and refusal to see the truth about the woman he chose to hang out with. There are so many things we can talk about with this story. How it's important to think through your actions and how what we might do reflects on ourselves, our families, and God. We can talk about how the people you hang out with can change you and use you, and that's why it's so important to surround ourselves with good people. We can talk about lust and love, how they're not the same, and you shouldn't let yourselves be driven by lust or desire, especially when you know that person doesn't feel the same way about you. But I think the most important thing is that sometimes people fail. Sometimes we fail our people. Sometimes we fail God. Samson failed. He didn't save Israel. His greatest accomplishment resulted in his own death. He failed God over and over again by doing things he knew were wrong and sinful. People will fail us. It is as they say, to err is human. Humans make mistakes. We do wrong things. You can't put your faith solely in any one person to save you, or complete you, or never fail you. Only God is that faithful. And he is faithful, as we will see going forward. just as he was faithful to Samson in the end and gave him strength back. Just because Samson failed, it didn't even mean it was the end of Israel. God was still faithful to Israel. There is hope because God has a plan. A king is coming. And that is the end of today's lesson. So,